Acolyte, in the last record, we stood amid the ashes of Monarchia, a city brought low not because it rebelled, not because it raised arms, not because it denied the Emperor, but because it worshipped him. That distinction matters. It mattered to Lorgar. It mattered to Guilliman. It mattered to Malcador. And though he would never have admitted it out loud, it mattered most of all to the Emperor. For Monarchia was not merely punishment. It was a warning, a message carved into stone, dust, and kneeling demigods. The Emperor had no tolerance for gods. Not false gods, not alien gods, not the gods of old night, not even himself. And to understand why, we must descend below the palace, below the marble halls, below the banners, below the golden throne room of terror, down into sealed chambers where the Imperium's greatest dream was built in silence. A dream not of conquest, not of eternal war, not of endless crusade, but of escape. What if the Great Crusade was never meant to be the Emperor's final design? Now, the Imperium teaches that the Great Crusade was the Emperor's grand design, that humanity was destined to spread across the stars beneath his banner, crushing Xenos, reclaiming lost worlds, and binding all mankind beneath a single throne. This is only partly true. And partial truth, Acolyte, is often the most dangerous kind. The Great Crusade was real. Its armies were real. Its compliance fleets were real. Its victories were real. The dead worlds, burned temples, shattered alien empires, and conquered human kingdoms were all quite real. But the Great Crusade was not the destination. It was the road. And roads are made to be travelled, not worshipped. The Emperor did not intend humanity to remain forever in a state of war. He did not raise the Legiones Astartes so they could spend eternity feeding the guns of empire. He did not create 20 gene-forged sons so they could merely become warlords of 1,000,000 battlefields. The Crusade had a purpose. It was a brutal instrument, yes. A blade swung across the stars. But even a blade is shaped by the hand that wields it. And the Emperor's hand was reaching for something beyond conquest. He wanted time. He wanted unity. He wanted control. Most of all, he wanted humanity severed from the thing that had almost destroyed it. What wound was the Emperor truly trying to close? To understand the Webway dream, one must first understand the wound it was meant to close. The warp, the immaterium, the sea of souls. Call it what you will. the name changes nothing. It is the wound behind reality. A realm where thought has weight, emotion has hunger, and every fear mankind has ever known can learn to wear a face. During the Dark Age of technology, humanity crossed the stars with confidence. Its machines were mighty. Its knowledge was vast. Its reach was almost beyond imagining. But even then, mankind depended upon the warp. Its ships did not truly sail through space. They plunged into madness and emerged elsewhere. Its navigators did not chart stars. They stared into unreality and prayed their third eyes did not lead them screaming into damnation. Its empires were not held together by roads, rails, or rivers. They were held together by storms. And when the storms came, everything broke. The Age of Strife did not merely isolate human worlds. It taught the Emperor the shape of mankind's greatest weakness. Humanity could build wonders. Humanity could master genetics, weapons, machines, stars. Humanity could terraform worlds, command armies, and reshape itself in 1,000 ways. But so long as mankind needed the warp to survive, mankind remained chained to a loaded gun. And worse, it kept pulling the trigger. Now, why would the Emperor tolerate powers he intended to replace? Consider the Navigator, the noble mutant, the sanctioned abomination, the blessed guide whose bloodlines were preserved, protected, and feared. Without navigators, the Imperium could not function. Without them, fleets would crawl between stars at a pace too slow to hold a galactic empire together. Reinforcements would arrive centuries too late. Worlds would vanish into silence. Trade would collapse. War would become local. Terror would become a throne over ashes. The Navigator was necessary. And that necessity was intolerable. The Emperor permitted many things he despised when they served the greater design. He permitted the Mechanicum its rituals. He permitted the legions their traditions. He permitted the Primarchs their pride. He permitted the Navigators their power. But permission is not approval, and tolerance is not trust. The Navigator houses were not merely servants of empire. They were a dependency. A hereditary monopoly over mankind's ability to move. An entire civilization held hostage by the eyes of mutants staring into hell. Then there are the Psykers. Useful, powerful, dangerous. Every Psyker was a doorway. Some were small doors. Some were locked. Some were watched. But a door is still a door, And beyond it waited things that had learned across eons to knock softly. The Emperor saw the future of humanity not only as it was, but as it might become. A psychic species. Brilliant. Ascendant. Vulnerable beyond measure. Without control, mankind's evolution would become its extinction. Old Night had already offered proof. Worlds consumed by possession, civilizations drowned in madness, witches crowned as kings, warp entities worshipped as gods. Populations fed into rituals by men and women who thought themselves chosen. The Emperor had seen what happened when superstition met psychic power. The answer was always blood. Why would the Emperor deny gods he knew were real? This is why the Imperial Truth mattered. Not as philosophy, not as enlightenment, not as a simple denial of gods. It was a weapon. The Emperor did not tell mankind there were no gods because he was naive. He knew what lurked behind the veil. He knew there were powers in the warp vast enough to wear divinity as camouflage. He knew they answered prayers. He knew they granted miracles. He knew they could bless, curse, heal, mutate, whisper, bargain, and devour. He knew better than almost anyone alive. And still he said, there are no gods. Because belief itself was not harmless. Belief was fuel. Faith was an open channel. Worship gave shape to hunger. To kneel before the warp was to invite it closer. To name a thing divine was to strengthen the mask it wore. The Imperial Truth was not merely a lie. It was quarantine. A hard, cold barrier of reason imposed upon a species still crawling out of the nightmare of Old Night. No gods, no spirits, no demons, no miracles, only matter, only reason, only mankind. It was never completely true, but it was supposed to be useful. And perhaps, in the Emperor's mind, that was enough. I hear you ask, why did one loyal city have to be made an example? So now we return to Monarchia. Return to the perfect city. The holy city. A city of golden streets and kneeling multitudes. The city that loved the Emperor exactly as Lorgar had taught them to love him. To any mortal ruler, Monarchia would have been a triumph, a loyal world, an obedient world, a world where the Emperor's name was spoken with reverence, a world ready to die for him. But the Emperor did not see loyalty. He saw infection. He saw the old pattern beginning again. Priests, hymns, relics, pilgrimage, sacred architecture. Mass devotion focused upon a being of overwhelming psychic significance. A god being manufactured by those who insisted they were praising a man. Lorgar believed he was building the future. The Emperor saw him rebuilding the past. And so Monarchia had to fall. Not because it threatened compliance, but because it threatened the plan. The Emperor could not lead mankind away from gods while allowing one of his own sons to create a religion in his name. He could not starve the warp while Lorgar was feeding it devotion by the world. He could not free humanity from superstition while the word bearers dragged conquered planets into worship. The lesson was cruel. It was also clear. No gods, not even me. But Lorgar did not hear the lesson the Emperor intended. He heard rejection. He heard humiliation. He heard the death of meaning. And in that silence that followed, other voices became easier to hear. What route could possibly free mankind from the warp? Beneath the Imperial Palace, hidden from almost all eyes, lay the true heart of the Emperor's design. No, not the throne room, not the council chambers, not the parade grounds where generals knelt and oaths are sworn. A gate. An impossible passage. A wound cut into another kind of road. The Webway. An ancient network of extra-dimensional tunnels built in an age before mankind had crawled from its own cradle. It did not belong to humanity. It was older than any human language. Older than Terra's first empires. Older than the species that now squatted upon the ruins of a galaxy and called itself Master. The Eldari had used it. The Old Ones, according to fragmentary and contested records, may have shaped it. Its full nature remains beyond Imperial comprehension. But its value was obvious. Travel without the warp. Movement between stars without plunging ships into the Sea of Souls. Communication, expansion, reinforcement, commerce, migration, and war conducted beyond the reach of storms. A road through the galaxy that did not require navigators. A path that did not require Gellerfields. A route through darkness where demons could not simply claw at the hull. A way for mankind to move without begging passage from hell. This was the Webway dream. Not merely conquest. Not merely survival. Liberation. Humanity unchained from the warp. Humanity no longer dependent on mutants to steer its vessels. Humanity no longer isolated by storms. Humanity no longer forced to trust every voyage to madness. Humanity no longer easy prey. So what future was the Emperor building beneath Terra? Imagine it, Acolyte. Not as Imperial propaganda imagines it. Not as banners and choirs and marble statues. Imagine the strategic reality. The Great Crusade reaches across the galaxy. Human worlds are reclaimed. Xenos threats are broken. The Primarchs bring sectors into compliance. The legions secure the stars. The Mechanicum feeds the war machine. The Imperial Truth suppresses superstition. Psykers are identified, controlled, or removed. Religion is stamped down before it can mature into ritual power. And beneath Terra, the Emperor builds the final piece. A human-controlled access point into the Webway. A replacement for warp travel. A hidden artery of empire. When complete, the Crusade could end. The legions could be reduced, redirected, or as we have seen with the Thunder Warriors, perhaps destroyed. The Primarchs could become governors, generals, administrators, scholars, or relics. The Navigator houses would lose their stranglehold. Astropathic reliance could be diminished. The warp would no longer sit at the center of human civilization. The gods would starve. Not because mankind defeated them in battle, but because mankind stopped listening, stopped traveling through their realm, stopped praying, stopped fearing, stopped feeding the dark with every terrified voyage between the stars. That was the dream. A rational species, united and protected, maturing into its psychic future behind walls the warp could not easily breach. It was beautiful. It was monstrous. It was impossible to separate the two. And what price would mankind pay for salvation? The Emperor's plan required control on a scale no human civilization had ever achieved. Every world brought into compliance. Every religion dismantled. Every psychic population monitored. Every alien empire judged for usefulness or extermination. Every human policy forced into unity, whether it welcomed salvation or not. There could be no exceptions. No isolated cults growing in the dark. No independent empires bargaining with warp entities. No priest kings turning populations into ritual engines. No friendly Xenos left alive if their existence threatened the design. No human world permitted to choose ignorance. This is the part many records avoid. The Emperor's dream was not gentle. It did not ask mankind to follow. It seized mankind by the throat and dragged it towards survival. There is a kind of mercy that looks like cruelty from inside the moment. There is also a kind of cruelty that calls itself mercy because history has not yet had time to judge it. The Emperor understood threats on a scale few could comprehend, but understanding danger does not make every answer righteous. He sought to save mankind, He also denied mankind the choice to refuse salvation. This is the contradiction at the heart of the Imperium. A dream of liberation built by tyranny. A future without gods, built by being treated as one. A war to free humanity from the warp, fought by armies whose souls would later drown in it. What happens when broken suns are used to build a perfect future? The Primarchs were instruments of speed. The Emperor had lost them once, scattered across the galaxy by powers that understood their value before they even knew their own names. When he found them again, he did not rebuild the plan around their wounds. He fitted their wounds into the plan. Horus became the favoured son. Guilliman, the builder of order. Dawn, the wall. Russ, the executioner. Magnus, the scholar. Lorgar, the mistake that would not stop kneeling. Each was brilliant. Each was damaged. Each was useful. That last word matters. Useful. The Emperor loved them, perhaps, in his own way. But his way was not human enough to save them. He needed generals. He needed conquerors. He needed compliance. He needed the galaxy brought to heel before mankind's psychic evolution outran mankind's ability to survive it. So he used them. And because he used them, he failed to see where they were already breaking. Angron's rage, Curz's visions, Perturabo's bitterness, Matarian's hatred, Magnus's pride, Lorgar's need, Horus's hunger. These were not minor flaws. They were fault lines beneath mountains. And the Emperor was building a future upon them. And far below Terra, beneath the palace, the Webway waited. A single failure there would undo everything. But which of the suns stood closest to the Emperor's hidden design? Of all the Primarchs, Magnus the Red should have understood. He, more than any of his brothers, knew the warp was not empty. He knew thought had predators. He knew knowledge could have teeth. He knew power answered those bold enough to reach for it. But Magnus believed mastery was possible. The Emperor believed control was necessary. Those are not the same thing. Magnus saw the warp as an ocean to be studied. The Emperor saw it as a flood to be contained. Magnus thought warning and wisdom could overcome danger. The Emperor knew that sometimes warning arrives wearing the voice of the danger itself. Records concerning the Emperor's intended role for Magnus remain sealed, contradictory, or deliberately mutilated. Some suggest Magnus was meant to sit upon the Golden Throne. Some suggest his psychic might was central to the Webway Project. Some suggest the Emperor intended to use him as both key and guardian. Some suggest these fragments are later rationalizations written by those desperate to find order in catastrophe. The truth has been buried beneath too much ash. But this much is certain. Magnus mattered. The Webway mattered. And when father and son finally collided over the limits of knowledge, the consequences would be measured not in lives, but in futures. So there was a weakness inside the Emperor's greatest dream? Well, of course, every great design contains a weakness. Sometimes it is a flaw in metal. Sometimes it is a misplaced trust. Sometimes a single assumption left untested because the architect cannot bear to imagine being wrong. The Webway Project's weakness was not ambition. Ambition built it. Its weakness was secrecy. Almost no one knew of the full design. The Primarchs were not told. The Legions were not told. The Imperium was not told. Humanity was being marched towards a future it did not understand, led by a ruler who would not explain himself, protected by lies that were meant to shield minds too fragile for the truth. The Emperor hid the gods. He hid the Webway. He hid the true purpose of the Crusade. He hid the destination from those bleeding to reach it. Perhaps he believed explanation would invite corruption. Perhaps he believed trust was inefficient. Perhaps he had seen too many futures where knowledge itself became the weapon of the enemy. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps that's the most terrible possibility. But ignorance has a cost. Lorgar did not know why faith was forbidden. Magnus did not know what his warning would break. Horus did not know what future his father had abandoned the Crusade to build. The Primarchs saw absence. They saw secrecy. They saw rejection. And in those empty spaces, the enemy planted meaning. So who would lead the Great Crusade if the Emperor were to turn away from it? While the Emperor laboured beneath terror, the Great Crusade thundered onward. Worlds burned, compliance was declared, the legions advanced, the Primarchs became legends in the eyes of men. And above all others, one sun rose. Horus Lupercal, first found, best loved, brightest star of the Crusade. To the armies of the Imperium, Horus was victory given human shape. To his brothers, he was rival, diplomat, commander, and sometimes friend. To the Emperor, he would become something far more dangerous, necessary. For the Emperor could not remain at the front forever. The Webway demanded his presence. The dream beneath the palace demanded his mind. But the Crusade still needed a master, and so the road began to bend towards Ullanor, toward triumph, toward elevation, toward the moment when Horus would be raised above his brothers. Not merely honored, not merely praised, chosen. The Imperium would call it glory. The remembrances would call it history. The legions would call it victory. But from the vantage of this archive, Acolyte, we may call it by another name. the beginning of the separation, father from sons, emperor from crusade, Horus from brotherhood, dream from reality. The Webway dream was the Emperor's answer to the oldest wound in human history. The warp had broken mankind once. He meant to ensure it never could again. To do so, he built an empire of reason with armies of engineered monsters. He outlawed gods while becoming the object of worship. He punished faith without explaining the hunger it fed. He sought freedom through absolute control. And beneath the palace, hidden from the species it was meant to save, he began carving a road out of hell. But dreams, Acolyte, dreams are fragile things. Even the dreams of gods, especially the dreams of those who deny they are gods. The road from Monarchia led to Cadia. The road beneath Terra led into the Webway. And the road of the Crusade led now to Ullanor. In the next record, we shall examine the greatest triumph of the Great Crusade, the breaking of a greenskin empire, the gathering of Primarchs, the crowning of the War Master, Ullanor, where the Imperium celebrated the height of its glory and failed to recognize the shadow it had cast.